History 7. Black Death, The Rise of Doom. In the mid-13th century, long before the world fully grasped what was coming, strange outbreaks of disease began appearing across Western Asia. Chroniclers in Syria, Egypt, and Iraq described people struck down by high fevers, painful swellings, and confusion that left them delirious. These scattered episodes did not yet explode into a full pandemic, but they were the first whispers of something greater. Modern scientists believe they may represent early traces of the plague bacteria, quietly preparing for the devastation that would soon sweep across continents. The real storm began in the 1340s, during the Mongol siege of Kaffa, a trading hub in Crimea. The defenders were trapped inside, as Mongol soldiers, themselves dying of plague, turned to a desperate and brutal tactic. According to accounts, they hurled infected corpses over the city walls, spreading fear and sickness among those inside. When Genoese merchants finally fled by ship, they carried more than just trade goods. Unknowingly, they transported one of history's deadliest diseases, setting it loose on an unprepared Europe. By late 1347, Europe's defenses had already been breached. Genoese ships arrived in Messina, Sicily, bringing death in their holds. From there, the disease spread quickly to Marseille, Genoa, and other Mediterranean ports. News traveled slower than the infection itself, and entire communities were struck down before realizing what had arrived. This was the opening act of Europe's great tragedy, as the plague began its relentless march inland. No fortress, no border, and no wealth could shield the people from what was to come. From 1348 to 1351, the plague spread like fire through dry grass, consuming city after city. Florence saw its population collapse from around 110,000 to just 50,000. In Norway, more than 60% of people perished. Estimates suggest 1/3 to perhaps 1/2 of Europe's population was wiped out in those few years. Families vanished overnight, villages stood empty, and the world seemed to lose its balance. For survivors, the scale of death was almost impossible to understand. Europe had become a land of silence and mourning. The consequences reached far beyond sorrow. With so many workers dead, fields went untended, markets emptied, and the normal rhythm of trade collapsed. The shortage of labor left lords and landowners powerless, their feudal systems crumbling under the weight of necessity. Suddenly, surviving peasants and workers found themselves in a new position of strength. Wages rose, rents fell, and the rigid structures of medieval society began to shift. Yet governments often resisted, imposing price and wage controls in a futile attempt to hold on to the past. Not all effects were hopeful. In towns and cities across Europe, fear turned into suspicion, and suspicion into violence. Jews and other minorities were scapegoated as the cause of the plague. Rumors of poisoned wells and dark conspiracies spread like wildfire. In Strasbourg, 2,000 Jews were massacred in a single day in February 1349, and entire Jewish communities in Mainz and Cologne were destroyed. These tragedies remind us that alongside disease, human cruelty also flourished in the shadows of the Black Death. The cultural impact was equally deep. Religious fanaticism rose, with groups of flagellants wandering from town to town, whipping themselves in search of God's mercy. Artists began to embrace darker themes, filling murals and manuscripts with haunting images of skeletons in the Danse Macabre, a grim reminder that death spared no one. With the sharp decline in population, forests reclaimed abandoned farmland, changing the very environment of Europe. The Black Death was not only a biological disaster, but a cultural turning point, reshaping minds, beliefs, and landscapes. Even after the initial wave passed, the plague never truly disappeared. From the 1350s well into the 17th century, Europe faced recurring outbreaks. Each time it returned, it killed thousands more, though genetic research suggests the bacteria itself gradually adapted, becoming less instantly lethal, but more enduring. This ensured the disease haunted Europe for centuries. The Black Death left scars that were not only physical, but also social, economic, and spiritual. It forced humanity to adapt, rebuild, and rethink the fragile balance between life, death, and survival.